Crossing to North Africa shortly, and we're going to be talking to one of our regular commentators, Elizia Volkmann, about some of the goings on the continent there. But just before that, I always like to look back in history. We're supposed to be learning from history, but sometimes, sadly, we find history repeating itself. But anyway, 1975, a lot of things were going on in Mozambique in June. It was the final phase of its transition to independence from Portugal, which was eventually granted on June the 25th. But on June the 13th, political negotiations were underway between Frelimo and the outgoing Portuguese regime. And there was rising tensions and celebrations, of course, at the same time, building towards that liberation milestone. And at the front of this was struggle hero Samora Machel. And so Mozambique finally got its independence, 1975, and then sadly spent decades in civil war. Do you remember that? Eventually, that was resolved, and now the new struggle for Mozambicans is the big question of democracy. Is it as robust and as people would want it? Well, we saw protests after the last election suggesting that there's a lot of dissent, particularly amongst young people, in terms of Frelimo being in power for so long. All right, let's go to North Africa now and do our wrap. We turn our attention to that region and the broader Sahel, where political tensions, cyber conflict, human rights trials and migration continue to dominate headlines, from courtroom drama in Algeria to diplomatic friction between neighbors and the latest rescue of migrants in the Mediterranean. It's a region, as you're hearing, experiences both upheaval and movements of cautious calm. Well, to help us unpack the latest, we're now joined by Elizia Volkmann, one of our regular commentators, who's a journalist closely following events in North Africa and the Sahel. Elizia, always good to talk to you. How are you today? All right. I don't think she can hear me. We can't hear her. Elizia, can you hear us? All right. Elisa, just check your mute button and see if that isn't on. Alicia? Hello, Alicia? All right. All right. Elisa, are you there?
Yes, I am. So I'm just having
fantastic.
A few technical difficulties here. Good morning. Good morning.
Happy Friday. So,
hello.
Yeah, no, it's all good here. We're getting into a long weekend. You know, June 16th is a big event on Monday, so it all starts on the Friday. Most people take a time off, except us journalists. Never a day off. Okay.
No, never a day off. No.
So let's start with this rather unique grassroots action in the Maghreb, a convoy of cars and trucks organized by local activists. What's the story behind this, and what does it signal about local sentiment?
Yes, the Al Samud convoy. It's really quite unique that these different groups from Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya have organically sort of come together to protest in solidarity with the people of Gaza. It set off on Monday in Tunisia. We've seen different convoys set off individually from different countries, and people have been flying into Cairo as well. And you have to understand that this has been the culmination of regular protests and marches in the different Maghrebi countries, and that the feelings of support for Palestine are something very, very fundamental. Since the Nakba, the horror, this has been a very important cause right across the Arabic world. But I think particularly in the Maghrebi region, these feelings are particularly strong, and particularly in Tunisia. If you remember that the former president, Habib Bourguiba, he very much took on the Palestinian cause as a national cause for Tunisia. to the extent that he gave office space and sanctuary to the PLO. For a long time, Yasser Arafat, who is the leader of the PLO and the sort of iconic symbol of the Palestinian struggle, he and his people were based in Hammam Shot in southern Tunis. And there was a bombing of Hammam Shot where Tunisians died. So that really kind of solidified this feeling of a common cause. And it is also a sentiment about how the sort of what they see as colonial powers and sort of Western empirical powers actually continuing into the present day. So that's at the heart of this sort of common feeling within the Maghreb. But these are just small organizations, individuals coming together, rallying and getting organized. There are about 100 private cars leaving Tunisia, as well as big buses. And we've seen generosity along the route. As they pass through Libya, people have been giving them food. And indeed, apparently even petrol stations have been donating petrol and diesel to the buses. Things have started to change somewhat since their entry into Egypt. There have actually been 200 activists who've been arrested at the airport or have been searched in their hotels in Cairo. So we're not quite sure how the march towards Rafah, which was meant to start today, is proceeding. We weren't even sure if Egypt was actually going to let people in. It seemed that they did. But we've seen reports of, for example, there were 3 Algerian lawyers who were arrested yesterday as those entered Cairo airport. So we're waiting for updates about whether the march will proceed and whether they will cross the border at Rafah into Gaza. They're also carrying medical aid and other provisions for the people of Gaza, because I'm sure people have seen the reports about the blockading of aid into Gaza, and according to the UN, only about 20% of aid being provided is actually getting through. Right. So I'm sorry about this. There's a naughty little kitten who wants to be on the podcast as well. So
no, we are very inclusive here.
Just all that rather than trying to keep
I'm mindful of time, so let's move to Algeria, where this trial of human rights lawyer Soufiane Ouali is making headlines. He's been charged with terrorism. What are the specifics of the case, and what's been the reaction from civil society and rights groups?
Well, this has been a really long, ongoing case. There's unfortunately an ongoing crackdown on civil rights and civil society members, lawyers, even poets in Algeria. Algeria is a very hardline regime. It's not comfortable with dissenting voices. What's surprising about Ouali's case is that this has gone on for over a year. Initially, back in July last year, he was taken from his house, and for a while he was disappeared. And lawyers and civil society were demanding that that the authorities explain where he was, give him access to lawyers. So this has gone on and ground on for some time. So his trial was on Wednesday. And now you're saying you're making headlines. It's actually kind of the reverse. We've been trying hard to actually get the information and find out even if what was the sentence, because Algeria is very, very tight-lipped about this. They want to silence people, but rather than say in Tunisia, where there's also been a political trial here. These trials are very publicised in Tunisia. It's not so much in Algeria. It really is about completely silencing people. This began, waves of it began following the election back in 2019 of Abdelmajid Tebboune, who was re-elected. And prior to that, there had been Al-Haraq. Al-Haraq is Arabic for the movement. and they had been demanding that the then President Bouteflika step down, that measures to start fresh elections and to move towards a more open democracy begin. And sure enough, there were elections. They got Abdelmajid Tebboune, but they did not get democracy, and they did not get a more open society. Instead, they got more crackdowns. And what has been consistently happening is that the Tebboune regime uses counter-terrorism laws to silence civil society because they are particularly heavy laws. And also, once you frame somebody within the framework of being a terrorist and a threat to the state, it's a mechanism of turning people against these individuals and to create suspicion that actually they're working against the Algerian state rather than being upholders of human rights and civil rights.
So there've been recent armed clashes in Tripoli. Can you tell us a little bit more about what triggered this violence and what the situation is looking like at the moment? Is there calm? Is it holding?
It's calm and holding. When I saw videos of the Al Samud convoy going through Zaria, I was thinking, oh, is this going to go okay? Zaria is really one of the worst places in terms of security. We've seen sort of a number of the smaller armed groups clashing, particularly on Sunday. This all goes back to the assassination of Ghanewa, Al-Kikli a couple of weeks ago, which we discussed on the show. And although there was a peace and a truce, and in fact, ultimately, Debeba organised this on National Security Council, which is bringing together disparate groups, so that we've seen the RADA, which was an ally of Al-Kikli's militia, coming together with the Mizraten 111 brigade. All the brigades have got numbers and names, and they so anybody following Libya is following multiple different names and of brigades. And this is also with the Ministry of Defence and the Ministry of Interior. And that was an attempt for people to bury the hatchet rather than bury each other. But the tensions are such because there's still not 100% consensus behind Prime Minister Debeba. There's still a real sort of fight for who's going to be top dog within the region. There is a lot of discomfort, and because Debeba, he's out of his mandate, he's not elected. There are a lot of people who are vying to try and see if he can be sort of pushed out of power, which was why Ghanewa was assassinated. He was very much the man to challenge Debeba at the time. So it's possible we're going to see these clashes kind of grind on. And an expert on Libya who covers Libya regularly and visits Libya regularly, he was saying that what he thinks is going to be the case is that the bigger militia are going to be sort of engaging in kind of an arms race, that things might be relatively quiet over the course of the year, and then we'll see a big explosion when people feel confident enough to win. Right. There's no single militia that is big enough and has enough firepower to win an outright war at the moment in Libya.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Who knew just how complicated things would become after Muammar Gaddafi? Elizia, we're going to have to leave it there. Always good talking to you, and we'll chat again next week. Have a lovely weekend.
Great, and enjoy your celebrations.
We're going to do our best. We're going to do our best.
Absolutely.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's one of our regular commentators, journalist, researcher, and filmmaker, Elizia Volkmann, giving us some insights on the North Africa and Sahel region. It's time now for your news headlines as we say